The first vulnerability I'm going to discuss in this section will be SQL injection. And I decided to start with this specific attack because it's a very, very, very powerful attack, SQL injection. Until now, since long time, they were not able to fix 100% this attack. So you may find a lot of websites infected with SQL injection. Now, on this video, I'm going to explain what is the SQL injection, and I'm going to show you a proof of concept. And on the upcoming video, I'll explain a couple of examples about how SQL injection can be used to retrieve some information. Now, SQL injection, it's actually a problem with the SQL database, and it's related to the developer problem. That means that it's usually a problem in programming. What is exactly SQL injection? SQL injection is to try to talk to the database from the website. And let me give you a small example about that. Let's open a web page. Any login web page. So let's see. I can go to Google and type in URL login.php or .asp, any login page. And if you remember those terminology to be used in search, we explained that in the reconnaissance how to search in Google. So when you open a page like that, when you are requesting to enter your credentials, so you'll be able to log in. So you put any username, like John, and any password. What exactly? And the password will be, John, and the password will be password. For instance, what exactly is going on backstage? Now what happened is the website has a database that include all the users and their password. And when you write down a username and a password, those information will be taken and it will be verified from a table inside this database. If your credential, your account and credential exist, it will let you in. If not, it will not let you in. So that means that there is a database on the back-end server from where he can validate the input, the username and password. So what happens is when you write your username and password, and they will be taken in a variable and they will be verified in a database. The database will check if there is a username with the same password, and it should give one of two answers, true or false. I mean, maybe you put the right username but the wrong password. So he will take those two information and he will validate from a website, from the database, and the database will check if the username exists, fine. If the password exists, fine. If they are related together, it will reply back to you by yes or true, and accordingly you will log in. If you put a valid username with the incorrect password, he will go and check this username and password. He will find a username but the password do not match, so he will reply to the user false, so you will not be allowed to log in. So this is how it works. Okay, now what will happen if we wrote inside this page some SQL comment? So we start talking to the database, tell them, could you ignore this username and password and let me log in? Now there is actually two probability if we do that. If the database is well designed, it will not accept that. So you cannot talk to the database from those fields. If it was not designed well, so the database is going to reply back to you, and then you can start communicating. So usually we do the following. So for instance, we can go here and type this, like after John or whatever, we put this sign, apostrophe, and then we put or 1 = 1 and we can put here hash, and we can put the same down. Okay, so I can take it, copy, and put it down. Okay, now let's explain exactly what do we have here. This sign apostrophe mean in SQL ignore whatever was requested from you earlier. So whatever is requested on this page, ignore it. And please check this syntax. Is 1 equal 1? Now what the database will be replying for this question? Is 1 equal 1? Yes, it's equal 1. So the answer will be true, and accordingly you will be logging to the system. Now this hyphen, this hash, usually in SQL, in some kind of SQL, mean ignore the next step, which is entering the password. So you tell them just verify 1 equal 1 and forget about whatever was requested after that, which is the password. Okay. Sometimes they put this hash, sometimes they put hyphen, depending on the type of database that you are using. Are you using SQL, Microsoft SQL, MySQL? There is different kinds of database. So different kind of database may have different syntax, a small difference in syntax. So if the site was infected with SQL injection, I can bypass the authentication. And let me show you that live first, and then let's see how we can get advantage, or how we can utilize this attack. So I have a virtual machine here where I created a database. Here we go, by the name of XYZ. So if I type use XYZ semicolon, and you don't, by the way, you don't need to memorize SQL command. Definitely if you get to learn some SQL syntax, it will help you. But even if you are not aware of the SQL syntax, you still can utilize that. And then I can type select star from accounts. So I have a table. I created a table by the name of the account, by the name of accounts, where I created two different accounts, Ahmed with the password pass1 and Muhammad with the password pass2. And I'm assuming that I'm going to relate this table with the website that I just showed you. So if someone type Ahmed and pass1, he will allow to log into the database. So this is the table that includes the password that any user will be validated from. Now here is the tricky part in SQL. I will actually associate with this video some of the SQL commands that you may need, especially this file, how to create a database, how to create a table, how to check. So let's take the syntax first. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's take this syntax first. Let's see the syntax, which usually it's should be the syntax that relates the website to the database. So if the user went to the database that I just showed you and wrote username Ahmed and password pass1, what will happen is this syntax will be executed. So select star, I mean show me from the table any record that have name equal Ahmed and password equal pass1. So if you do that, actually there is one record here. As you can see, there is one record that has this information. So the database will reply to the site telling him, yes, we have a username under this name and a password under this name. And accordingly, it will be logged in. So the answer was yes, or the database replied yes or true, and he was able to log in. Now, on the other hand, if I wrote down a username Ahmed and a password false, what would be the answer of the database? It would be false. We don't have a record under this name. So if I put on the site Ahmed and password false, he will say, I'm sorry, I don't have any record under this name. I may have Ahmed, but I don't have a password that matches this password. So it was not working. Now what will happen if we do this? We wrote in the field the same way I showed you, Ahmed or 1 equal 1. If you remember, I told you that the apostrophe mean ignore that and just verify this syntax. Is 1 equal 1? And what is the hash? Hash mean ignore the remaining of the syntax. So if this site was infected with the SQL injection, let's see what will happen. I'm writing down an invalid username and password, but because I wrote a SQL syntax, let's see what will happen. When I press enter, he told me that yes, the answer is yes, we have a record under this name, and it will let you in. So what happened is I use an incorrect username and password, and according to that, and I manipulate the SQL syntax, and he let me in because I start talking to the database, give them some syntax, tell them to ignore some part, and he accept and he replied back to me. So this is the idea of SQL injection. SQL injection is a very big subject, and I'm going to refer to some materials that you can use to get more, because actually what we are talking about here, it's one type of SQL injection. It's called the error-based SQL injection, but actually there's like 6 different types of SQL injection. So this is the idea of SQL injection. Now we used to use this idea. Of course, you should not try that on any of the real website. You should try it on the damn vulnerable website that I explained in a previous video how to install it in your machine and to set up your lab, and then you can test whatever. But the point here is that since we do not just use the SQL injection to bypass the authentication, but since that the site is infected with SQL injection and the database reply back to us, so instead of just using that to bypass username and password, I can write a command here that will create a user. I can write a command that will delete a user or create a table or delete a table. Imagine that if you log into a bank website, that you can write SQL commands that allow you to change in the balance, because you can ask the database to do anything. So you can tell them, go to my account and add $1 million. So SQL injection is quite serious. It's not just to bypass the authentication. It can be used to dump and get whatever information you have on the database, not just the accounts, but anything that exists on database, username and password, credit card, bank account, anything. It can be used to change, so you can manipulate that and you can modify in the database. So it's a very, very serious subject. Now, before I switch to the next video, I just want to point that we'll be taking some attacks related to SQL injection, but also I would like to refer you to a specific book that if you need to get more about SQL injection, one of the very, very good book I read was SQL Injection, Attack and Defense. This is a very, very good book, and it will take you step by step from scratch to the advanced SQL injection technique. We'll cover as much as we can here, but we're going to use some tools. But if you need to do things by your hand manually without using the tools, this is one of the very good books that you can use, SQL Injection, Attack and Defense. On the next video, we're going to start taking some attacks and show you a proof of concept related to SQL injection.